know what is appropriate. If you want to speak about this in Weber's terms, they follow a traditional action type, and they only reconsider every now and then if they come across a certain problem. If in a trial and error process they need to find, just a new rule of appropriateness. This also implies that actors do not start from a predefined set of preferences, but that in the process of acting, of deliberating, new preferences emerge, or what Dewey calls this ends in view kind of perspective. That is, goals may emerge in the process of acting. Think about your own studies. Who of you always thought that sociology could become a major? It's very likely that in the process of studying, you develop new preferences and new goals instead of already knowing ex ante which ultimate preferences you want to realize. So in the pragmatist view, the other is also not seen just as a constraint as to one's own goals, but is conceptualized as someone co-constructing actually the meaning of social situations. So this borrows here from symbolic interactionism, to which we will turn very soon. But the idea is a very Hegelian one, that is that other actors help co-construct the just meaning of situations, the meaning of one's own goals. Think about how in like small groups, for instance, the joint goals of group activity are defined in a process of mutual deliberation. And an important term in this context also meets generalized other. So where implicitly, even like when you're sitting in your own room in a lonely environment, you are in a constant dialogue also with sort of this generalized other person with whom sort of you communicate and in cooperation with whom you formulate certain goals. Last but not least, then the pragmatic actors, when compared to the rational choice actors, are always constituted also in the process of social interaction. So they're not ready-made, but it basically takes others to be oneself. So a lot of the tenets behind this model of action in the pragmatist sense draws then on the theories of symbolic interactionism, which are associated here with George Herbert Mead, whose writings were compiled by his students actually in this book published after his death, Mind, Self, and Society. Mead was not a prolific writer, much more of an orator, and held many lectures, which are the classic behind symbolic interactionism, where Herbert Blumer is much more of the popularizer of this point of view. So Mead had studied also in Germany and was inspired actually by Simmel's writing about the Wechselwirkung, these mutual kind of influences. His work can also be understood, if you want, as an empirical psychology of Hegel's model of recognition. This is at least Axel Honnett's interpretation. So Hegel, in his Phenomenology of the Spirit of 1807, develops a theory about how conscience develops into ever more complex stages, from an individual conscience up to entire societies and collective institutions. In one of the stages in this, let's say, long learning biography of conscience in Hegel, then this, let's say, recognition of others and by others becomes an important element in individual progress, such that individuals learn that being recognized by others is an important ingredient in one's own development. And for Hegel, this was just, let's say, a theoretical model to reconstruct the evolution of entire, let's say, societies and complex institutions. For George Herbert Mead, this was in a way the blueprint also for investigating processes of mutual recognition empirically. So Mead's work has also been received in empirical psychology. So symbolic interactionism can then be summarized in three main tenets. The first of which is that human action deals with the meaning of objects. So think about a person playing the card game of solitaire. An observer sees this person moving around individual cards, back to a staple in a certain order. And these bodily movements obviously do not make much sense to this observer, who just observes these bodily movements, no meaning attached. So for a symbolic interactionist, then this entire situation makes much more sense once we think about it in terms of the meaning that this individual person associates with these pieces of paper, which are cards in this game of solitaire, where you have to put many of these cards back onto a certain staple in a certain order. So very much close to also Max Weber's understanding tradition in sociology. A symbolic interactionism associates then actions with a certain meaning, and then also objects involved in the actions with a certain meaning. It's not just about physical objects and physical movement, it's about the meaning. Sociology then is about understanding this kind of meaning. How is this meaning constituted? Here the important element is that it's constituted in interactions, and we will see this also in social interactions with the objects, and it's not constituted by the very nature of these objects. That would be a realistic theory of meaning. And it's also not only constituted by the individual psychology, that would be a psychological theory of meaning. It is constituted in this very pragmatic context of an individual interacting with the objects. So again, the solitaire card game, here it's in the interaction with the cards that the meaning is generated according to a symbolic interactionist. So in this process also the creation of symbols that are often described also through language plays an important role, hence also this symbolic interactionism. This becomes much clearer when we move here to also the social interaction space. So imagine also a game of poker where there needs to be an understanding, a joint understanding of the different rules of what the cards actually mean, and of how the counting is done, of who is allowed to say something during the game. And in this particular case, then the card's colors, for instance, constitute a certain symbol that is agreed upon. And it is only in this context then that the meaning is constituted. And it is constituted in most of these games, as we are social beings, through social interaction. The third important tenet in symbolic interactionism is then that the meaning of human action or certain symbols and objects is not defined sort of eternally, but is always reinterpreted and may be subject to change. And this is the important difference also to, let's say, a Durkheimian kind of sociology, which is often reproached to follow a structural determinism. In this much more micro-sociological symbolic interactionism, then it's much more important how individuals in a certain social situation interpret the different rules and norms. And in this individual interpretation, there's always room for social change. So George Herbert Mead has this important legacy also of Hegel in his work, in that what self actually means, so who one is as a person, is also not predefined, but is always renegotiated and influenced by what is called the significant others. So these are parents, teachers, etc. for children. Who one is as a person then depends ultimately on the other persons you interact with. Another, let's say, more methodological implication of this third tenet is that if, as a sociologist, you want to observe a meaning, one way to, let's say, observe this kind of meaning is to